Welcome to the Tesla Economist. Please hit the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. We often talk about Tesla's main advantage being down to the amount of range their cars offer compared to the competition at the same price point, due to all their software, hardware, drivetrain, motor and battery efficiencies. And yes, this is a huge advantage, and one of the biggest reasons people choose to buy a Tesla. But because they sell relatively few cars when compared to Toyota, Volkswagen or GM, it's often underappreciated how impressive Tesla's economies of scale have reached. This is a large part of Tesla's business model and is often underlooked due to their impressive advances in technology taking so much of the spotlight. So let's review just how vast Tesla's economies of scale are and how they might grow even more in the future, what strategies Tesla are adopting in order to further enhance these economies of scale, and why it's so necessary for Tesla. Let's start with Tesla's level of vertical integration. Most auto companies are really nothing more than a component assembly plant, you might say. They make very few of their own components themselves, in the belief that if you outsource the manufacturing, then the company will specialize in making a much better version than you could, and said company could effectively take advantage of their own economies of scale, as they would be providing the same components to all your competitors too. For example, if you made a component in-house, you might require only 100,000 of these a year, but if you had a supplier, they might be producing several million of them, thus taking advantage of economies of scale. The component company can invest more in research and development and technology to make a better product than the auto company could. So this makes a lot of sense. The auto company can therefore purchase said component for cheaper than they could make in-house, in theory. In addition to that, it can be a large capital expense to start developing your own components. It will require more factory space and equipment, along with all the extra time and effort required setting it all up. So not only the extra capital expense, but there are less resources on the core element of the business, and there is a distraction on having to produce extra components. These resources could be spent better on growing the company in other ways, particularly when there are already suppliers for these components. So as you can see, it makes a lot of sense to outsource components where possible, rather than produce them in-house. But of course, these component companies need to make profits too. If an auto company was able to assemble these components effectively, then these profits would add to their company, or possibly the reduction in cost would mean they could compete more on price more competitively. In Tesla's case, it's a huge objective to just get the cost of these cars down, and if you are good enough, then you can endeavour to create your own components in-house. And this is one of the major ways Tesla is reducing costs, taking all the cuts of all the middlemen on the way and passing the savings on to consumers and increasing the profit margins for investors. For example, Tesla are the only auto company that make their own car seats. But like I said, these component companies supply multiple automakers, so the components must work for all automakers. So they have to make a one-size-fits-all product to make sure it suits all their customers. With vertical integration, you just need to make the one product for you that fits your requirements. But in addition to that, it goes even further. As you are making a lot of your own components, and then you find ways of making them work in unison. We see this with Tesla's Octavalve, designed for thermal management. Being more vertically integrated gives them control of their suppliers, because they are their own suppliers, so there's less disruption in the supply chain. There is also no risk of your suppliers going out of business. Also, the components are made in the same factory or nearby to reduce delivery costs and time. If a component manufacturer supplies several different manufacturers, then it's difficult to be near all your customers. This is known as economies of location. The level of vertical integration Tesla are considering is pretty much the whole way, from mining the minerals out of the ground to owning the showrooms that display the cars. Not even Henry Ford owned his own dealerships. Although Henry Ford was a true believer of vertical integration too. And in my opinion, Elon Musk has obviously used Henry Ford for inspiration. The level of integration that Ford went to blows my mind. And as much as I do respect Elon, Henry took things to another level again. He owned his own steel mills. He even started Fordlandia in Brazil, in the Amazon rainforest, to grow his own rubber plantation. Fordlandia was a total failure, but you have to admire the level he was willing to go. And this was all to cut costs to lower the price of the Model T, and Ford ended up getting the price down from around $900 to $260 at its lowest. That is an enormous saving, but it was just one model of car to continually make and refine for almost 20 years of manufacturing. Doesn't this sound a lot like Tesla? We've just witnessed the new Model S and X. They're the same car they were previously, with just a facelift. Tesla are going to keep the same shaped cars over 20 or so years too, and like Ford, they'll be doing everything they can to cut costs everywhere. Tesla have barely begun mass producing. The Model 3 has only been out for a few years, and look how much the cost and price have come down already. Can you imagine what difference another few years will make, let alone 20 years? There is also such a thing as horizontal integration. This would be like Tesla buying out Ford. Tesla would then incorporate all their technologies and economies of scale into Ford's cars. Tesla would also acquire all of Ford's competitive advantages they have learned over the years of manufacturing. It would mean Tesla have a lot more factories instantly built that just require some retrofitting. Elon has even flirted with the idea and mentioned that if an incumbent OEM did approach him, he would not be opposed to an acquisition deal. Translation: we're not looking to purchase any OEM and pay a premium, but as soon as any of them realize that they're about to go bankrupt because they can't compete in EVs, then Tesla would happily purchase them at a discount to keep them alive, and then take advantage of their resources. Tesla don't waste money unnecessarily either. For example, Tesla's rear view mirrors are perhaps about $30 to manufacture, whereas BMWs are around $93. A rear view mirror is good enough after a certain point if it does the job and won't fall apart. Okay, this isn't actually economies of scale, but just another example of how Tesla are keeping costs down. Again, nothing to do with economies of scale, but an apt point when reducing costs. Tesla still don't spend any money on advertising. However, the auto industry is notorious for the level they spend on advertising. It's a huge amount to convince consumers to buy their cars. Tesla doesn't need to convince anyone. They have enough owners doing that for them. The cars sell themselves. They're just such good value for what you get. Tesla designed the Model Y to be as similar as the Model 3 as possible. It is essentially an SUV crossover version of the Model 3. Due to that, they are then able to share a lot of the same parts. According to Tesla, they share 75% of the same parts. This means you need less machines to produce different parts for a different car, meaning a lot of savings with economies of scale. And again, we've just seen how similar the new S and X interiors are, a lot of shared parts there too. In fact, Tesla will be making so many of these cars for such a long period of time, then they're able to make some serious capital investments on the production line. As each unit they produce, the marginal cost of the capital is reduced. For example, if you spend $10 million on some capital equipment and use it to make 10 units, then the cost of this capital was $1 million per unit. However, if you use the same equipment to make 1 million units, then the cost of capital is just $10 per unit. Every unit produced, the marginal cost of the capital reduces with it. But if you are changing your car models every 5 years, then you require new capital equipment for each model change. But if you never change it, then the cost of the capital reduces per unit for every extra unit sold. The best example of this with Tesla is their GigaPress. They're not messing around with these either. They've purchased about a dozen so far already. They're absolutely genius and very underrated, and no other competitor seems to be showing any signs of adopting the technology. But they make parts cheaper, faster, better, and safer. Elon has said he wants factories on every continent. This is beneficial for several reasons. The most obvious reason is shipping and transport. If the factories are closer to the consumers, then there's obviously less distance for them to travel. Every extra mile of delivery adds to cost. And when we're talking about millions of cars, it certainly adds up. In addition to that, the models can be altered somewhat to better cater the target market. The factories in Asia can make Teslas more in tune with Asians' lifestyles. The factories in Europe are more focused on European applications. For example, we know that Tesla are making different versions of the Model 2 in Europe and Asia. It's rumoured the European one might have 4 doors and the Asian one might only have 2 doors. If Tesla are reaching 20 million vehicle sales a year, then costs can be spread among all the cars. 20 million is an astronomical number, but if the cars also have great margins too, then some serious expense can be justified. Except the thing is, although Tesla may be selling 20 million cars a year in the future, at that stage they may already have 50 million or so cars on the road. When they spend money on R&D, if it's for software, then these software advances aren't just for new cars, but they can be rolled out for the entire fleet with over-the-air updates. They might even charge for some of these updates if they increase range by 30 miles or something. The great thing about software is it's a one-off cost and can be delivered to every car at no incremental cost. The level of R&D that Tesla can justify on software is at a level that we've never seen before. Of course, the R&D doesn't have to stop at software. Knowing that you have a target of 20 million plus cars a year and having a market cap of nearly $1 trillion, then you can justify some serious R&D on manufacturing too, hence the GigaPress. But also the cell-to-vehicle integration too. The fact the battery pack is made of the car structure, I believe, is incredibly underrated, and again, it's something no other manufacturer shows any signs of copying to. As Tesla get bigger and start selling more cars, we'll continue to see more genius manufacturing design from this company over the years. You could say they've only just got started. So as you can see, Tesla is very much an economies of scale company, doing everything they can to reduce their costs to a level we haven't seen since Henry Ford and definitely nothing like we see from any of the other OEM competitors out there. I look forward to seeing all the future ways Tesla will cut costs and take advantage of economies of scale. Thanks for listening, please hit the thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe.